Everyone asks the same question when they start: how do I build a personal brand? And what they're really asking is, how do I get people to trust me before I have proof, before I have wins, before I have results they can point to? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Nobody cares about your brand. They care about whether you're useful, credible, and consistent. A personal brand is not built by aesthetics, logos, or clever bios. It's built by signals. Signals that say, this person knows what they're talking about, this person does the work, and this person will still be here tomorrow. Most people get this backwards. They think branding is about visibility first, posting first, talking first, being loud first. But attention without trust is worthless. In fact, it's dangerous, because once people doubt your legitimacy, you don't get a second first impression. So the real game isn't becoming known. The real game is becoming undeniable. You don't start by asking, how do I look like an authority? You start by asking, how do I earn authority? And early on, that authority doesn't come from money, titles, or big wins. It comes from effort, from proof of work, from doing so much, so consistently, that no one can question whether you're serious. You document what you're building, what you're learning, what you're fixing, and what you're failing at. Not to look smart, but to show reps. Because reps are credibility in disguise. A personal brand is simply your reputation at scale, and reputation is built when your actions align over time. When people see you show up when it's boring, when it's uncomfortable, when no one is watching. That's why small players win. They care more. They respond faster. They protect their name because it's all they have, and that care becomes the brand. If you're willing to do more, give more, and stay longer than everyone else, you don't need permission to build a personal brand. The market will give it to you. The first and most important idea is that credibility must come before visibility, because authority that is not rooted in proof collapses the moment it is questioned. When someone decides to build a personal brand, the instinct is often to focus on being seen as quickly as possible. Posting daily, sharing opinions, teaching concepts, and positioning themselves as an expert feels like progress. But without credibility, all of that attention is fragile. The moment an audience senses exaggeration, borrowed confidence, or unearned authority, trust erodes, and once trust is lost, it is almost impossible to recover. That is why prioritizing legitimacy from the beginning is not optional, it is foundational. Credibility answers a silent question every audience member asks, which is, why should I listen to you? This question is rarely spoken, but it governs every decision to follow, engage, or buy. If that question is not clearly answered through evidence, consistency, and demonstrated effort, people default to skepticism. Credibility does not require massive success at the start, but it does require alignment between what is claimed and what is actually being done. When there is a gap between words and reality, the brand becomes performative rather than trustworthy. Building credibility first means choosing to earn authority instead of declaring it. Declared authority is when someone calls themselves an expert, a coach, or a leader without sufficient proof. Earned authority is when the audience reaches that conclusion on their own by observing patterns of behavior over time. This includes consistent output, transparent documentation of progress, and a visible commitment to improvement. The key distinction is that earned authority is resilient because it is based on observable reality rather than self-assigned labels. This approach also reduces long-term risk. A personal brand built on hype requires constant maintenance, exaggeration, and escalation to hold attention. Each post must be bigger, bolder, and more impressive than the last. Eventually, reality catches up. A personal brand built on credibility compounds instead. Each action reinforces the previous one. Each piece of proof stacks on top of the last. Over time, The individual no longer has to convince anyone because the evidence speaks for itself. Credibility. First thinking also shapes how content is created. Instead of posting opinions detached from experience, the focus shifts to sharing insights grounded in real effort. This could be lessons learned from doing the work, mistakes made along the way, or systems being tested in real time. The audience may be smaller at first, but it is higher quality. These people are not following for entertainment alone. They are following because they recognize authenticity and seriousness. That kind of audience is far more likely to trust recommendations, buy products, and advocate on your behalf later. Another critical aspect of credibility is self-respect. When someone builds a brand without proof, they often feel internal tension because they know the image they are projecting is ahead of their actual experience. This creates insecurity, overcompensation, and defensiveness when challenged. In contrast, when credibility is built first, confidence becomes calm and grounded. There is no need to posture or inflate results because the person knows exactly what they have done and what they have not. This internal alignment shows up externally in tone, clarity, and consistency. Starting with credibility also changes how setbacks are perceived. If the brand is built on perfection and success, failure becomes a threat. But if the brand is built on effort and proof of work, failure becomes part of the narrative. It strengthens credibility rather than weakening it. The audience sees someone who is actually in the arena, learning, adapting, and continuing despite obstacles. That relatability deepens trust and makes the brand more human and durable. Importantly, credibility does not require waiting until everything is figured out. It requires honesty about where one stands. A beginner can be credible if they are transparent about being a beginner and are visibly doing the work. The issue is not lack of experience. It is pretending to have experience that does not exist. When effort, learning, and execution are documented consistently, authority emerges naturally as a byproduct of time and repetition. In the long run, prioritizing credibility first creates leverage. Opportunities compound toward people who are trusted. Partnerships, clients, and platforms seek out individuals whose reputation is solid, not inflated. This allows the personal brand to grow without constant self-promotion because others begin to validate it externally. That external validation then reinforces credibility even further, creating a cycle that is difficult to replicate for those who skipped the foundational work. Ultimately, a personal brand is simply a public record of behavior. By choosing to make credibility the first objective, the brand is anchored in reality rather than aspiration. Visibility can always be scaled later, but trust must be earned slowly, deliberately, and through action, because credibility is not something you claim. It is something the market decides based on what you repeatedly do. When external achievements are not yet available, effort-based proof becomes the most reliable way to establish legitimacy and momentum. Many people delay building a personal brand because they believe they have nothing impressive to show, no revenue numbers, no major clients, no public wins that validate their authority. This belief creates paralysis, even though effort-based proof is available to everyone regardless of starting point. Effort is democratic. Anyone can commit time, energy, and consistency, and when that effort is made visible, it signals seriousness in a way that cannot be faked over long periods. Effort-based proof shifts the focus from outcomes, which are often influenced by timing, resources, and luck, to inputs, which are fully within one's control. Instead of saying, "I made this much money," or "I worked with these big names," the signal becomes, "I show up every day and do the work." High volume output, consistent practice, and disciplined execution communicate reliability and work ethic. These traits are deeply attractive to audiences because they suggest future competence even before results fully materialize. This type of proof also lowers the barrier to starting. Waiting for external validation before taking action puts the individual in a passive position, dependent on circumstances. Effort-based proof places them in an active role, creating content daily, documenting experiments, sharing frameworks being tested, or publishing learnings from real attempts builds a public track record. Over time, this track record becomes evidence of commitment. People may debate opinions, but they rarely question someone who is visibly putting in sustained effort. There is also a psychological advantage to focusing on effort rather than outcomes. When identity becomes tied to results, motivation fluctuates with success and failure. When identity is tied to effort, consistency becomes easier to maintain. The question shifts from, did this work, to, did I do the work today? That mindset reduces emotional volatility and allows progress to compound. In public-facing work like personal branding, this consistency is crucial because trust is built through repeated exposure to aligned behavior. Effort-based proof also reframes early-stage content. Instead of positioning oneself as a finished expert, the individual becomes a practitioner in motion. Sharing lessons learned, mistakes made, and adjustments in real time creates authenticity. The audience is invited into the process rather than presented with conclusions detached from experience. This transparency builds connection and trust because people relate more to progress than perfection. Watching someone improve over time creates a sense of investment, as if the audience is growing alongside the creator. Another key benefit is defensibility. External achievements can be dismissed, minimized, or attributed to factors outside the individual's control. Effort, when sustained and visible, is difficult to dispute. Publishing hundreds or thousands of pieces of content, consistently refining ideas, and staying active over long periods sends a clear message of durability. Most people quit early. Those who persist automatically differentiate themselves. Over time, effort itself becomes a filter that separates serious players from casual participants. Effort-based proof also accelerates skill acquisition. High repetition leads to faster feedback loops. The more content produced, conversations had, or systems tested, the more data is generated. This data improves judgment, clarity, and communication. As skills improve, the quality of output increases, which eventually leads to external results. In this way, effort-based proof is not just a branding strategy, but a performance strategy. The brand improves because the person improves. From an audience perspective, effort signals future value. Even if someone is not yet the best, people can recognize trajectory. They can see direction, ambition, and discipline. Many are willing to follow, support, and even pay someone who is clearly moving forward, especially if that person is accessible and honest. This is often more compelling than polished success stories that feel distant or unattainable. Importantly, effort-based proof protects reputation in the early stages. Instead of charging aggressively or overpromising, the individual focuses on building competence and understanding. This reduces the risk of disappointing clients or followers. When monetization eventually happens, it is backed by a foundation of practice and insight. The audience feels like the transition is earned, not forced. Over time, effort-based proof naturally converts into external achievements. Consistency creates visibility. Visibility creates opportunity. Opportunity creates results. But the key is that the results arrive after the work, not before. By embracing effort as proof, the personal brand grows organically, rooted in action rather than aspiration, and signals legitimacy long before traditional markers of success appear. Documenting the learning process publicly is one of the most effective ways to build trust and authority when results are still forming. Many people hesitate to share their journey because they believe they must first reach mastery before speaking. This belief creates unnecessary silence and delays growth. In reality, documenting learning does not mean positioning oneself as a finished expert. It means making the process visible, showing what is being tested, what is being understood, and what is being corrected in real time. This transparency creates credibility because it reflects honesty rather than performance. When someone documents their learning, they remove the pressure to have perfect answers. Instead of making absolute claims, they share evolving insights. This shifts the relationship with the audience from teacher to student into peer to peer exploration. People are naturally drawn to this dynamic because it feels real. They are not being talked down to or sold certainty. They are being invited into a process. That invitation builds trust faster than polished conclusions ever could, because the audience sees the thinking behind the outcomes. Public documentation also creates accountability. When learning happens privately, it is easy to skip days, abandon experiments, or rationalize inconsistency. When learning is shared publicly, effort becomes visible, and visibility increases commitment. The act of publishing reinforces discipline. Each post becomes a marker of progress, and over time, those markers form a clear trail of development. Anyone who encounters the brand later can scroll back and see growth unfold, which is powerful evidence of authenticity and persistence. Another advantage is that documenting learning accelerates understanding. Teaching or explaining concepts, even while still learning them, forces clarity. Gaps in knowledge become obvious when trying to articulate ideas. This creates faster feedback loops. Questions from the audience reveal blind spots. Corrections from more experienced people refine thinking. Instead of learning in isolation, the individual benefits from collective intelligence. This speeds up skill acquisition and reduces the time between effort and competence. There is also a strong emotional component to this approach. Watching someone learn is relatable. Most people are not at the finish line, they are somewhere in the middle. When they see someone slightly ahead of them sharing openly, it feels accessible. This creates a sense of connection that polished experts often lack. The audience does not just consume information, they root for the person sharing it. That emotional investment strengthens loyalty and long-term engagement. Documenting learning also reframes mistakes. In traditional branding, mistakes are hidden because they threaten the image of competence. In process-based documentation, mistakes are assets. They become lessons, data points, and content. Each failure adds depth to the narrative rather than damaging it. This removes fear from experimentation. The individual becomes more willing to try, test, and iterate because even unsuccessful attempts produce value through insight. From a strategic perspective, this approach builds a unique voice. Instead of repeating widely known ideas, the content reflects lived experience. Even common concepts gain originality when filtered through real application. The audience is not just hearing what works in theory, but how it plays out in practice. This specificity differentiates the brand, because no one else has the exact same path, constraints, or observations. Importantly, documenting learning does not mean sharing everything or oversharing. It means being intentional about what is useful. The focus is on insights that others can apply, patterns that are emerging, and lessons that were earned through effort. This maintains professionalism while preserving honesty. Over time, as competence grows, the tone naturally shifts from exploration to guidance, without any abrupt change in positioning. As this practice continues, authority emerges organically. The individual becomes known not because they claimed expertise, but because people watched them earn it. Early followers become witnesses to the journey. Later followers see a backlog of proof. Both groups trust the brand for the same reason: consistent, visible effort paired with thoughtful reflection. which turns learning itself into a credibility engine that compounds with time. Grinding through high output actions is one of the most misunderstood but most powerful ways to establish credibility when nothing else exists yet. Early on, people overemphasize quality and underemphasize volume because quality feels respectable while volume feels unsophisticated. But without repetition, quality has no foundation. High output is not about spamming or being careless. It is about creating enough surface area for learning, feedback, and improvement to occur. When someone commits to producing at scale, they compress years of experience into months, and that compression becomes visible proof of seriousness. High output works because it is measurable and undeniable. Saying you are disciplined or committed means nothing. Showing that you have produced hundreds or thousands of pieces of work does. Volume is a form of evidence that does not rely on opinion. Anyone can look at the body of work and see the effort that went into it. Even if individual pieces are imperfect, the aggregate tells a story of persistence. Over time, people stop evaluating single outputs and start evaluating the trajectory, which is far more important. Another reason high output matters is that it reduces fear. When output is low, each piece feels precious. Mistakes feel costly. Criticism feels personal. When output is high, no single piece carries emotional weight. This detachment allows experimentation. Different angles can be tested, different styles explored, and different ideas challenged without hesitation. The willingness to experiment accelerates learning, and learning is the real engine behind improvement. High output creates an environment where progress is inevitable. High volume also sharpens judgment. The more times someone executes a task, the better they become at recognizing patterns. What resonates, what falls flat, what feels forced, what feels natural. This intuition cannot be taught. It must be earned through repetition. Each iteration refines taste and decision-making. Over time, quality improves, not because of deliberate perfectionism, but because poor options are eliminated instinctively. This is why people who produce a lot often appear more confident and clear. Their clarity is the result of having already explored and discarded confusion. From an audience perspective, high output signals commitment. Most people start and stop. They post for a few weeks, then disappear. Consistency over long periods stands out because it is rare. When someone continues producing regardless of engagement, feedback, or immediate reward, it communicates intrinsic motivation. Audiences trust people who do not rely on validation to keep going. That trust forms the basis of credibility long before any external success appears. High output also builds resilience. Criticism is inevitable when work is public. Producing frequently normalizes feedback. Both positive and negative responses become data rather than judgment. This emotional resilience is essential for anyone building a personal brand, because visibility increases scrutiny. Those who have trained themselves through volume are better equipped to handle attention without becoming reactive or defensive. Another overlooked benefit is optionality. With high output, more opportunities emerge. More content means more chances to be discovered, more ideas to repurpose, and more insights to refine into products or services later. Even if early work is not monetized, it becomes raw material for future leverage. Low output limits options because there is simply less to build on. Importantly, high output does not mean ignoring improvement. It means prioritizing momentum first and refinement second. The discipline of showing up daily creates a baseline. Once that baseline is established, quality naturally increases through repetition. Trying to optimize before consistency exists leads to stagnation. Movement creates clarity, not the other way around. In the long term, grinding through volume becomes a competitive advantage. Most people are unwilling to sustain effort without immediate payoff. Those who are willing build a body of work that compounds. The market may not reward the effort immediately, but it always notices consistency eventually. When results finally arrive, they appear sudden to outsiders, but they are built on an invisible foundation of relentless output that made credibility unavoidable. Working for free at the beginning is one of the fastest and safest ways to accelerate competence, credibility, and clarity, yet it is often misunderstood as weakness or lack of self-worth. In reality, offering free work early is a strategic investment, not a permanent pricing decision. When someone is just starting, the biggest risk is not undercharging. It is charging before they truly understand the problem they are solving. Free work removes friction from the market and allows learning to happen at a speed that paid engagement rarely permits in the early stages. When money is removed from the equation, expectations shift in a healthy way. Clients are more forgiving, more open, and more willing to give honest feedback. This creates an environment where experimentation is possible without damaging reputation. Early mistakes are inevitable, and making those mistakes while people are not paying protects long-term trust. Instead of disappointing paying customers, the individual refines their process in a low-risk setting. That refinement becomes the foundation for future paid offers. Free work also provides access. Convincing someone to pay you when you have little or no proof is difficult and time-consuming. Convincing someone to try something for free is significantly easier. This difference matters because experience compounds. 10 real interactions teach more than months of theoretical preparation. By lowering the barrier to entry, free work dramatically increases the number of real-world repetitions, and those repetitions are what build skill, confidence, and insight. Another critical advantage is feedback density. Paid clients often withhold criticism, especially early on, because they do not want confrontation or because they assume flaws are normal. People who receive something for free are more likely to speak openly about what worked, what didn't, and what confused them. This honesty is invaluable. It reveals blind spots that would otherwise remain hidden. Each piece of feedback sharpens understanding of the market, the problem, and the solution. Free work also generates proof, which is the currency of trust. Testimonials, case studies, and tangible outcomes can be created without asking anyone to take a financial risk. Once this proof exists, selling becomes easier and faster. The transition from free to paid is no longer based on promises, but on demonstrated results. This reduces sales friction and positions the individual as someone who has already delivered value. There is also a psychological benefit. Free work shifts the focus from entitlement to service. Instead of asking what the market owes them, the individual asks how they can be useful. This mindset builds humility and adaptability, which are essential traits for long-term success. People who start by serving tend to listen more closely, adjust more quickly, and build stronger relationships. Those relationships often outlast the free phase and turn into referrals, partnerships, or long-term clients. Importantly, working for free does not mean working aimlessly. It should be intentional and bounded. The goal is not to be exploited, but to learn. Clear limits, specific objectives, and defined time frames ensure that free work remains strategic rather than draining. When approached with structure, it becomes a controlled environment for rapid growth rather than a trap. Free work also differentiates beginners from established players. Larger, more experienced providers cannot afford to give personal attention or customization at scale. A newcomer can. This creates a competitive advantage. The ability to be hands-on, responsive, and deeply invested in outcomes creates a level of care that clients remember. That care becomes part of the brand, and brands built on care tend to grow through word of mouth. As experience accumulates, patterns emerge. Processes become clearer. Confidence becomes grounded. At that point, Charging is no longer an act of hope, it is a natural next step. The market already knows what to expect. The individual knows what they are worth, because they have seen the results of their work repeatedly. This transition feels earned rather than forced, and pricing increases become easier to justify. In the long run, working for free early saves time. It shortens the path to competence, reduces costly mistakes, and builds trust before money is involved. While it may feel slower in the moment, it creates momentum that paid first approaches struggle to match, because learning, proof, and reputation are built simultaneously instead of sequentially. Generating testimonials through free initial work is one of the most powerful ways to reduce friction in the transition from unknown to trusted. At the beginning, the hardest problem is not skill or effort, it is belief. Prospective customers do not know whether you can deliver, and words alone are insufficient to convince them. Testimonials solve this problem by transferring trust from someone else to you. When early users describe their experience in their own words, skepticism drops dramatically because the proof no longer comes from you. It comes from people who had nothing to gain by endorsing you. Free work accelerates this process because it removes the main barrier that prevents people from taking the first step. Asking someone to pay without proof requires them to take on all the risk. Asking someone to try something for free shifts that risk onto you. More people are willing to say yes, which increases the number of real-world interactions. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to create a success story. Even modest wins, when articulated clearly by the person who benefited, carry far more weight than self-promotion ever could. Testimonials also compress time. Without them, acquiring paying customers often involves long explanations, repeated reassurance, and extensive persuasion. With them, the conversation changes entirely. Instead of trying to convince, you simply present evidence. The prospect sees someone like them who had a positive outcome, and that identification bridges the trust gap instantly. What might have taken months of back and forth can happen in a single interaction because the decision feels safer. Another important aspect is specificity. Testimonials born from free work often contain detailed insights about what worked, what changed, and how the experience felt. These details make them believable. Vague praise is easy to dismiss. Concrete descriptions of problems solved and results achieved are hard to ignore. Over time, a collection of such testimonials creates a pattern that signals reliability. Even if each individual result is small, the consistency across multiple voices suggests competence. Free testimonials also help refine positioning. Listening to how early users describe the value they received often reveals language that is more compelling than anything you could write yourself. These phrases can be reused in messaging, offers, and content, aligning the brand more closely with how the market actually thinks. This alignment reduces friction even further because prospects feel understood before any conversation begins. There is also a compounding effect. The first testimonial makes the second easier to get. The second makes the third faster. Momentum builds. Once a small base of proof exists, people feel reassured that they are not the first. Social proof lowers anxiety. Humans are wired to follow patterns of prior behavior, and testimonials signal that choosing you is a normal, reasonable decision rather than a risky one. From a confidence standpoint, testimonials are equally valuable internally. Early on, doubt is common. Seeing written confirmation that your work helped someone provides reinforcement. This confidence is not manufactured, it is earned. It shows up in how you speak, how you price, and how you hold boundaries. Prospects sense this grounded confidence and respond to it, further shortening the sales cycle. Testimonials generated through free work are also cleaner reputationally. Because no money exchanged hands initially, the feedback is perceived as more honest. There is less suspicion that praise was influenced by obligation. This perceived neutrality increases trust, especially in early stage brands where skepticism is high. Over time, as paid testimonials are added, they are supported by a foundation of organic validation rather than replacing it. Another advantage is speed to scale. Once testimonials exist, they can be leveraged repeatedly. They work while you are not present. They pre-sell on your behalf. This allows you to spend less time convincing and more time delivering. The energy saved can be reinvested into improving the service, increasing output, or reaching more people, which creates a positive feedback loop. Importantly, testimonials are not just about marketing. They are about proof of transformation. They show that something changed because of your involvement. That transformation is the core of value. When prospects see that change reflected consistently, the decision to pay becomes logical rather than emotional. They are not buying hope, they are buying precedent. In effect, free work followed by testimonials flips the traditional sales model. Instead of asking for money first and trust later, you give value first and earn trust up front. Once trust exists, payment becomes a formality rather than a hurdle, because the market already believes in the outcome before the transaction ever happens. Competing in a smaller, narrowly defined niche is one of the most effective strategies for building a personal brand, especially in the early stages when broad authority is unattainable. Many people make the mistake of trying to play in a large arena immediately, comparing themselves to established figures with years of proof, massive audiences, and entrenched credibility. The result is often discouragement, wasted effort, and a lack of visible progress. A smaller niche, on the other hand, allows for focus, control, and faster accumulation of proof, which compounds into real authority over time. Choosing a small niche creates clarity about who the target audience is and what problem is being solved. Broad positioning requires vague messaging because it attempts to appeal to everyone, which often appeals to no one. In contrast, a narrow niche allows precise communication. The language, examples, and offers can speak directly to the people within that niche. When an audience feels that someone truly understands their specific needs, trust forms faster and engagement increases. The clarity of focus alone differentiates a new entrant from larger players who must speak at scale and often in generalities. A smaller niche also reduces competition. In a broad category, newcomers are immediately measured against those with significant proof, large audiences, and high-level resources. Competing in that context requires either exceptional differentiation or extraordinary luck. A narrowly defined niche reduces that pressure because fewer people are actively addressing the exact same subset of problems. This creates an opportunity for early entrants to establish themselves as specialists, gaining a disproportionate share of attention relative to their size. Specialization in a small niche also accelerates learning and expertise. The narrower the focus, the more opportunities there are to iterate, test, and refine solutions in a controlled context. Instead of spreading attention across multiple topics or audiences, all effort can be concentrated on solving a particular set of problems. This focus enables the development of deep insight and actionable knowledge, which quickly becomes recognizable by the audience as expertise. Expertise in a small area naturally builds authority without needing to compare against larger competitors. A narrow niche allows for faster accumulation of proof. When the niche is small, even a modest number of clients, testimonials, or results appears significant. If someone has 10 clients in a highly specialized area, that number can establish credibility, whereas 10 clients in a broad market might be seen as negligible. Early successes can be showcased, documented, and repeated, creating a visible track record that prospective clients can trust Over time, this proof compounds, making the individual the go-to specialist within that niche. Another key advantage is accessibility. In a smaller niche, it is easier to offer personal attention, respond directly to inquiries, and build meaningful relationships. Large-scale competitors cannot maintain this level of intimacy. Early followers notice this difference, and the perception of care and responsiveness becomes part of the brand. Being approachable and attentive in a specific context makes the personal brand memorable and trustworthy, which accelerates growth more effectively than broad messaging ever could. Competing in a small niche also creates the opportunity for innovation. New entrants are not constrained by legacy methods, traditional hierarchies, or entrenched reputations. They can experiment freely, take risks, and create new ways of delivering value. Because the audience is smaller, feedback loops are tighter and adjustments can be made quickly. Successful experiments reinforce credibility and position the individual as a forward-thinking specialist, further differentiating the brand. This strategy also creates defensibility. As credibility accumulates within a focused niche, the brand becomes increasingly difficult to replicate. New competitors entering the same narrow space face higher expectations and a well-documented track record to surpass. Early focus allows the personal brand to become synonymous with a particular solution or skill set. Over time, the individual is no longer just another player in a large market, but the recognized authority within a defined segment. From a marketing perspective, narrow niches are more efficient. Resources spent on content creation, outreach, and engagement can be highly targeted. Messaging is more relevant, which improves conversion rates and reduces wasted effort. Every piece of content, every interaction, and every testimonial contributes directly to building authority in a space that matters, rather than diffusing energy across an overly broad market. Finally, success in a small niche often opens doors to larger opportunities later. Once a person has proven themselves and built a foundation of credibility, scaling into adjacent areas becomes easier. The reputation earned in the niche serves as a springboard for broader authority because the market already perceives competence. What starts as a tiny, specialized foothold can evolve into wider recognition, but the initial focus ensures that growth is anchored in credibility rather than hype, creating a stable and sustainable trajectory. Specialization and accessibility are two of the most powerful levers for building a personal brand, particularly when starting out and competing against larger, more established figures. While many people assume that success comes from competing at scale or trying to reach the broadest possible audience, the reality is that deep specialization combined with genuine accessibility creates disproportionate influence. When someone focuses on becoming a true specialist in a defined area, their knowledge, skills, and solutions become sharper and more recognizable. When they pair that with openness and availability, the market perceives them as both competent and approachable, which generates trust that larger competitors often cannot offer. Specialization signals expertise because it communicates focus and intentionality. People naturally assume that someone who concentrates on a narrow domain knows more about that area than someone who spreads their attention across multiple topics. Even if the absolute experience or skill level is modest compared to a global leader, the audience values depth over breadth, especially when the solutions provided are immediately applicable. This creates a perception of authority early, because the audience can see that the person is dedicating concentrated effort toward a specific problem, which makes recommendations and insights inherently more credible. Accessibility amplifies the effect of specialization by creating a direct and tangible relationship with the audience. Established authorities may have large followings and impressive credentials, but they are often inaccessible. Calls are screened, emails go unanswered, and engagement is limited. For someone starting a personal brand, being accessible, responding personally, engaging with questions, offering guidance, signals commitment and care. It shows that the individual is invested in the audience's success, not just in their own visibility. Accessibility builds trust faster than almost any other factor because it demonstrates that the person's knowledge is not abstract. It is available and actionable. The combination of specialization and accessibility also addresses the fear many newcomers have competing against established players. While large figures dominate the general landscape, they cannot dominate every small segment simultaneously. By focusing on a narrow area and being deeply present for those who need guidance, a new entrant creates a unique position in the market. Even if the individual is technically less experienced overall, they become the preferred choice within that niche because they are both knowledgeable and reachable. In essence, they turn what would normally be a disadvantage, being small or new, into a strategic advantage. This strategy also accelerates feedback loops. When someone is accessible, they receive immediate and honest input from the people they are helping or teaching. That feedback informs improvements, refines messaging, and strengthens offerings. In a smaller niche, the feedback is also highly relevant because it comes from people who represent the core target audience. Over time, the individual's understanding of the problem deepens, their solutions become more precise, and their credibility grows. Accessibility turns specialization into a dynamic, evolving expertise rather than a static claim. Accessibility also drives loyalty. People do not just follow expertise, they follow care. When someone consistently engages, answers questions, and responds thoughtfully, the audience develops an emotional connection. This emotional bond multiplies the impact of expertise because people are more likely to act on advice or support someone they feel connected to. Larger authorities, while impressive, often lack this personal touch. Being reachable and responsive creates differentiation that cannot be replicated by reputation alone. Another critical dimension is perceived value. When someone is both specialized and accessible, they become rare. Many experts are specialized but distant. Many people are accessible but generalists. Combining the two positions, an individual as both competent and approachable, which makes their offerings feel more valuable. People are willing to pay for access to knowledge and guidance when it is delivered personally in a niche area, even if the absolute scale of results is smaller than that of broader players. Accessibility amplifies the market's perception of expertise. Specialization and accessibility also facilitate trust through social proof. When someone is working closely with a small audience or group of clients and delivering results, each interaction becomes an opportunity to generate testimonials, case studies, and success stories. These outputs are powerful because they are rooted in real relationships. Unlike generalized marketing claims, these examples demonstrate that the individual is not only knowledgeable, but also committed to helping others achieve outcomes. The trust gained in this way is deeper and longer lasting. Moreover, this approach mitigates comparison stress. New entrants often measure themselves against the largest authorities in their field, which can feel overwhelming and demoralizing. By focusing on a small niche and being accessible, the individual defines their own playing field. Success is measured relative to impact within that segment, not against the total market. This focus allows momentum to build naturally because even small wins create visible proof in a context where attention is concentrated and meaningful. Finally, specialization and accessibility create a feedback loop of credibility and demand. As the individual demonstrates skill and provides accessible support, their reputation spreads. The more they help, the more proof accumulates, the more referrals and engagement they generate, and the more opportunities arise. Over time, this builds a virtuous cycle where their authority in the niche grows exponentially, not just through effort or volume, but through the combined power of focused expertise and meaningful, direct relationships with the audience. New entrants always have an advantage because they start from a position that allows flexibility, risk-taking, and the opportunity to outwork the competition, which established players often cannot. Many people assume that building a personal brand or gaining traction in a market requires extraordinary resources, fame, or prior success, but the truth is that being new confers unique benefits that seasoned competitors lack. Established figures operate under constraints imposed by reputation, scale, and expectations. Their brand, while large and recognized, limits their ability to experiment openly, engage personally with individuals, or make mistakes without consequence. A newcomer, on the other hand, faces none of these restrictions and can leverage their position to create rapid momentum. One of the clearest advantages of being new is the ability to move faster. Established players often have complex structures, legacy processes, and multiple layers of stakeholders that slow decision-making. Every change, every initiative, and every experiment must be filtered through existing systems and considerations. A newcomer can act immediately, testing approaches and iterating without seeking approval or fearing bureaucratic pushback. Speed in execution creates an opportunity to accumulate experience, feedback, and results before competitors can react. New entrants also benefit from lower expectations. Because the market does not assume expertise, early mistakes do not carry the same weight they would for someone with an established reputation. This creates a psychological safety net that encourages experimentation and learning. When testing messaging, offers, or products, a new entrant can take risks, fail fast, and adjust strategies without fear of irreversibly damaging credibility. These safe failures accelerate skill development and help refine positioning in a way that would be far more costly for established figures. Another key advantage is relatability. People naturally connect with those who are visibly working toward mastery, as opposed to figures who already seem untouchable or distant. New entrants can position themselves as peers, guides, or collaborators, inviting the audience to join their journey. This relatability creates trust because the audience feels they are engaging with someone who understands their challenges directly. Established players, while respected, often feel distant and unapproachable, which limits emotional engagement. Newcomers can exploit this gap by offering accessibility and attention that larger competitors cannot replicate at scale. The willingness to do more than competitors is another edge for new entrants. Established figures have reputations and resources to protect, which often leads to selective engagement. They may only work with certain clients, focus on high-margin opportunities, or limit personal availability. A newcomer can offer full attention, respond quickly, and invest more personally in every interaction. This level of effort is disproportionately impactful because the audience perceives genuine care and commitment. By outworking those higher up the ladder, a newcomer can create a competitive position that relies on effort, responsiveness, and attention to detail rather than pre-existing authority. New entrants also have a storytelling advantage. Every personal brand relies on narrative, and those starting out can frame their story in ways that are compelling precisely because they are fresh. Being new allows them to highlight ambition, willingness to learn, and authenticity without being constrained by past decisions or public expectations. The narrative of the underdog, the learner, or the scrappy competitor resonates deeply with audiences, creating emotional engagement that established players often struggle to replicate. Audiences root for the newcomer because they are invested in the growth process and can see the person actively earning credibility. This advantage extends to market positioning as well. New entrants can identify underserved segments or niches where attention, specialization, and accessibility can make a significant difference. They are not confined to legacy markets or entrenched hierarchies. Instead, they can choose areas where their influence and impact will be most visible, establishing authority in pockets that larger players ignore. By dominating these smaller spaces, newcomers create a foundation for growth that can later support expansion into broader markets once credibility and proof have been established. Another benefit of being new is the capacity for humility and rapid learning. Established figures may struggle to pivot or admit gaps in knowledge due to the need to maintain authority. New entrants, however, can openly experiment, seek mentorship, and adjust based on results without damaging perceived competence. This learning agility is often invisible to the competition, but manifests in faster skill acquisition and more innovative approaches. By documenting and sharing this learning publicly, newcomers can simultaneously build credibility and demonstrate growth, creating a feedback loop that strengthens the personal brand. Being new also allows the individual to embrace creative risk that others avoid. Established brands often avoid controversial or untested strategies because failure can have large consequences. New entrants have nothing to lose and everything to gain by experimenting with bold approaches in content, positioning, and offers. Even if some experiments fail, the lessons learned accelerate development, and the successes stand out more because they contrast with cautious, established norms. This risk tolerance can become a defining characteristic of a personal brand, signaling innovation, resilience, and authenticity. Finally, new entrants benefit from the compounding effect of early wins. Because they start from a low baseline, every positive interaction, testimonial, or proof point creates significant momentum. Each small success is amplified, attracting attention, building trust, and generating opportunities that feed back into the brand. Established figures may experience similar outcomes, but the proportional impact is smaller due to their already high visibility. For a newcomer, every effort, every connection, and every achievement has outsized influence, allowing the personal brand to grow faster in the early stages than many assume possible. Outworking competitors and accepting lower short-term rewards is one of the most underestimated strategies for building a durable personal brand and long-term authority. Most people underestimate the importance of effort in the early stages because they focus on immediate outcomes, visibility, income, or recognition. They measure success by what they have now rather than by what they are building for the future. The reality is that those willing to invest extraordinary effort early, even without immediate payoff, create a foundation that compounds over time. This compounding effect is not linear. It accelerates because credibility, skill, and reputation are cumulative. The more someone outworks others, the more proof they generate, the more trust they earn, and the faster their authority grows. Outworking competitors begins with consistency. Many people overestimate the value of talent and underestimate the value of showing up repeatedly. Consistency demonstrates discipline, reliability, and seriousness. Posting one exceptional piece of content or completing one successful project is valuable, but repeated output signals persistence. In the context of personal branding, persistence communicates to the audience and the market that this person is here to stay, is committed, and is invested in solving real problems. Repetition becomes a signal that cannot be faked, because sustained effort over time is difficult for most people to maintain. Accepting lower short-term rewards is another critical component. Early-stage personal brand builders often undervalue effort that does not yield immediate monetary gain. They may refuse to work for free, undercharge, or limit experimentation because they are focused on immediate return. However, early willingness to accept smaller rewards, whether in the form of low-pay, unpaid experimentation, or high-volume output, accelerates learning, generates proof, and creates testimonials that are essential for long-term success. By prioritizing experience and skill acquisition over immediate compensation, a new entrant positions themselves to command higher value later because they have built credibility, systems, and an audience. Outworking others also creates a skill gap that is difficult to replicate. While many competitors spend their energy on strategy, positioning, or waiting for the right moment, the individual who consistently produces content, delivers work, and experiments accumulates hours of practice that compound into superior ability. Malcolm Gladwell popularized the idea of 10 hours an hours, but it is not just raw time. It is deliberate, public, and accountable effort that accelerates mastery. Those hours translate into better decision-making, clearer communication, and higher quality output. In effect, early hard work creates a moat around the personal brand, because replicating that level of effort is rare, and results follow naturally from sustained execution. The act of outworking competitors also signals credibility to the audience. People are perceptive. They notice dedication, commitment, and responsiveness. A person who consistently produces, engages, and delivers demonstrates seriousness and professionalism. Even when results are small or imperfect, visible effort builds trust. Audiences are willing to follow and support those who show persistence because they anticipate that continued effort will eventually produce value. This anticipation converts into loyalty and engagement, which compounds over time into a stronger personal brand. Accepting lower short-term rewards also reduces risk while allowing rapid iteration. When financial or reputational stakes are low, individuals can experiment freely. They can test messaging, offers, products, and approaches without fear of catastrophic consequences. Each experiment generates data and insight that refine the brand, improve skill, and clarify positioning. Over time, this iterative process produces far more valuable results than waiting to launch a perfect product or claim authority prematurely. The willingness to work hard and take small, measured risks early accelerates learning in a way that high-stakes environments cannot. The psychological dimension is equally important. Outworking competitors requires discipline, resilience, and patience. It builds confidence rooted in action rather than aspiration. People who take consistent action develop an internal benchmark of capability. They know that they are willing to do what others are not. And this confidence manifests in the way they communicate, price, and deliver. The audience senses this grounded confidence, which reinforces the perception of authority even before major external successes appear. Effort becomes both a tool for skill development and a signal that enhances credibility. Outworking others also creates optionality. Producing more, engaging more, and experimenting more generates content, relationships, and insights that can be leveraged in multiple ways. For example, early content can be repurposed into tutorials, courses, or products. Early clients or collaborators can provide testimonials, referrals, or partnerships. Each unit of effort creates multiple future opportunities. This optionality is particularly powerful because it turns effort into assets that appreciate over time, rather than one-off accomplishments that vanish after completion. Another dimension is positioning within the market. By investing extraordinary effort early, a personal brand positions itself as dedicated, responsive, and authentic. Established competitors may rely on reputation alone, but newcomers willing to outwork them signal energy, commitment, and care that scale is unable to replicate. This positioning differentiates the individual in the minds of their audience and potential clients, creating a unique space where effort translates into influence and trust. It also allows the personal brand to compete strategically in smaller or specialized areas that are neglected by larger players. Finally, outworking competitors and accepting lower short-term rewards produces a virtuous cycle. Initial effort generates proof and credibility. Proof attracts early supporters and clients. Early clients provide feedback and testimonials. Testimonials generate trust and momentum. Momentum allows for higher value opportunities and compensation. Each stage reinforces the next, creating a compounding effect that is difficult for others to match. Those unwilling to accept short-term trade-offs or put in extraordinary effort early are forced to play catch-up, often behind individuals who built credibility and influence through deliberate, sustained action, creating an enduring advantage that accelerates long-term success. Building a personal brand is not about instant recognition, flashy results, or competing with the biggest names immediately. It is about showing up consistently, documenting your journey, specializing deeply, being accessible, and committing to outwork those around you. Every piece of content, every lesson shared, Every relationship nurtured compounds over time, transforming effort into credibility and visibility into opportunity. The path is not easy, but those willing to start from zero, embrace the grind, and invest in real proof inevitably create a presence that cannot be ignored and a brand that lasts.